นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. Good evening, if it's evening where you are. Here in Melbourne, it is evening, it's dark, and we have a beautiful full moon up in the sky. Last night was the full moon here, but tonight the moon is still full, radiant. The air is crisp, cold, but quiet, still. The atmosphere very conducive to the practice of the dharma. Even if you're living in a city, maybe you can't even see the moon very easily. You know, when you live in a city, often the lights around buildings and everything kind of hides the night sky. But sometimes you can get that atmosphere. You walk outside your home, get the stillness. It also depends partly on your state of mind, doesn't it? So if your mind is full of worries and concerns about things, then even if the atmosphere around you is very peaceful, secluded, you might not recognize that or be aware of it because you're caught up in your own internal thinking and problems. But we come to practice Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, to really get in touch with ourselves and more in touch with the truth, in the way that the Buddha described truth, Four Noble Truths, or Arya Satya Dhamma. This word Dhamma, if you know anything of the Thai language, and a little bit of Pali as well maybe, you notice it will pop up in different phrases. So in the Thai language, Dhamma pops up in the word Dhammachati or Dhammachat, which means just nature, the natural way of things. There's also another word which we use a lot, Thamada, which means ordinariness, or the usual way of things, the ordinary way of things. And there's a few other words, but it just points to the fact that the Dhamma is really everything. Because of course the truth is always there, whether we realize it or not. The truth of the way things are. You might say the timeless truths that the Buddha taught and pointed to. We call them akaliko, the akalika Dhamma, timeless. So whether there's a Buddha in the world or not, these truths are always present and active and affecting the way things are or displaying the way things are. But of course, human beings, we're very good at missing the truth or getting caught up in falsehoods and wrong truths and mistaken truths as well. So we often miss the truth. And that's probably why we suffer so much, which is a shame because even in this day and age, 2,500 odd years since the time of the Buddha, we still have the Buddha's teachings available to us. They're there for us to learn, study, hear, and then to practice. And we also have people, monks, nuns, men, women who have practiced them and are practicing them very well in the world. That's our good fortune. And you could say it's the world's good fortune. But of course, many people are caught up in all kinds of other things and they have no time for Dhamma or don't realize the value of the Dhamma, which is a shame, but the Buddha said we have to keep an even mind, a sense of equanimity towards that fact that just all the beings of the world, everyone, every last person, has their karma, and their life goes according to the karma they have made, and the karma they are making right now. So if you haven't made the karma you haven't sought out a Buddha or his students or his teachings, then it's quite possible you won't realize the value of it. You let it slip by, or just be interested in many other things, maybe other religions, other pastimes, other things in your life, and miss this incredible chance to hear and practice the Dhamma. But if you are here listening to this talk, it probably means you have already at least some level of interest and faith in the Dhamma, which is your good fortune, your good karma, we would say. And that's something to build on. It's also something to rejoice in. And that is a good starting point in our practice, because a lot of people say Buddhism's all about suffering and just tells you life is suffering and it's very depressing. Often the people who say that have not actually studied or practiced Buddhism. They're just kind of going on first impressions maybe. And perhaps that's the fault of some of the Buddhists who also talk a lot about suffering. But of course, that's not the only part of the teachings and the only practice we do, just looking at suffering and thinking about our suffering, because often if we're not ready, the more you think about the suffering, the worse you feel, and maybe you suffer because you're suffering. It can be a kind of cyclical thing, and you're just making things worse the more you think about it. But actually, there's a lot of good things in life as well, and that is also part of our problem, is we often miss the good or overlook the good things, fail to appreciate our good fortune, you might say our good karma. And so often we can remedy that quite quickly. And it's sometimes a practice we encourage, before you start a meditation, just take a few moments to recollect some of the good things you have in your life, some of the good things you've done, some of the good experiences you've had, some of your good fortune, and also what you see in the world around you, recognizing the good in others, good situations, good places, good people, good events. Because one of the expressions of our suffering as human beings, the untrained human mind loves to dwell on what's wrong, the problems, the bad things. As we say, we once had a news reporter from Channel 10, one of the Australian channels here, and they said, their boss gives them instructions. You've got to focus on blood, gore, death. That's your top news topic. You've got to go out and find us more blood, more pain, more trouble in the world. That was their job or their brief. Because bad news sells. Whether it's just two people talking, it doesn't take long before they're talking about something bad about their life or someone else's life. Or the news, the news media and all the different ways we obtain news and information these days. Everything tends to focus on what's wrong and what's bad. So it wouldn't be unusual, or it wouldn't be surprising that people love to do this, just think about what's wrong in their life. So a good starting point in meditation and training your mind is to think about what's good in your life first. And that's not to ignore what's wrong, of course, but just to balance things up, to address the imbalance. Every time you're feeling depressed because you hear or read something about a war somewhere, because that's something a lot of people complain about nowadays. There's so many wars and armed conflicts, so much death and dying. Okay, yes, it's true, the world has these problems. But, don't forget the majority of places, countries, people in the world are not experiencing a war. They're not dying from violence. They're living their lives. But it just doesn't make the news. It's that kind of approach, appreciating the good things we have wherever you are in the world, and occasionally even in a war zone, you can also appreciate the good things you still have. Number one might be if you're still alive. Not to make light of it, but just to say this is a truth, isn't it? And certainly if you're in a country where there's no war, well, you can appreciate that. Oh, there's no war here. Say, I live in Australia, there's no war, there's no famine, currently no mass disasters, although we do sometimes get disasters like most places. Sure, there's always a few economic pressures, but generally people have some money, have some wealth, they have food on their plate, they have clothes on their back, they have a roof over their head. However bad it is, it's not that bad. Or as my uncle used to say, it could be worse. Sometimes we have to stop and appreciate these things, the good things around us in the world, rather than just focus on what's wrong. Or if you're coming closer to home yourself, probably your first thought when you start meditation is, what's wrong? Oh, I can't do this. My mind is not peaceful. I feel too tired. This is not right. That's not right. I think a lot of people begin their meditation with a bit of negativity, from what I've heard. You have to catch that, don't you? Even at the beginning of your meditation, just set your mind up correctly. Go through or run through your day or your life, your recent life maybe, and think about a few of the good things that have happened to you and that you have witnessed. Even if you've got an illness or an injury that you're dealing with, there'll be parts of your body that are not ill or not injured or not particularly affected by the illness. Even if you're facing some kind of suffering in your life, some kind of problem with money or a relationship, there'll also be many other good things at the same time that you can also appreciate. The good things you've done, you may be annoyed with yourself. Right at the beginning of your meditation, you sit down and you're annoyed because your leg hurts and your mind's all over the place. But maybe you have to stop and say, maybe you've meditated before and already experienced some clarity, some peace, some insight in the past, and you can remind yourself of that. Sometimes we reflect on the kindness, the generosity that we've practiced in the past and had in the past, and just bring that to mind. Make our aspiration to continue to be generous, continue to practice kindness, compassion. Even just that thought, having that thought, is a sign that you're still an active, skillful, what you might call a good human being, because you have compassion, kindness in your mind. And sometimes we have to consciously bring that up in our mind. And you'll see when you're meditating, if you do that, often that puts you in the right frame of mind, gives you the right attitude, the right energy to start practicing. Of course, karma, a lot of the karma we make is habitual. So, you've set your mind up, you're appreciating the good things in your life and the world, even though there are problems. And you've done that, and your next thing, what happens is you go back to thinking about everything that's wrong. Everything that's wrong with yourself, everything wrong with other people, the world, back to square one. And that does defeat us sometimes. We defeat ourselves, we just keep going back to the negative thoughts, undermining our effort, undermining what we're doing. That's why you need to be patient and keep at it. But this practice is a training, isn't it? It's a cultivation, it's a training that you have to keep at. What did our teacher Ajahn Chah say about this? He said, well, the best kind of practice is continuous or regular practice, constant practice. Doesn't mean to say you're always or constantly peaceful or constantly mindful or constantly good, but it's more just that sense of returning to the good things you're developing, cultivating through your practice, and not giving up, not stopping. So regular practice and keep returning to this appreciation of the good things you do have, the good opportunities you have. And of course, keep returning to your meditation object while you're practicing formal meditation, because that's the hardest thing of all, to stay with the breath, if that's the meditation you're doing. But to see every moment that you are mindful of one in-breath, one out-breath is a little victory for you. It's a little step in the right direction. And even the Buddha had to admit, you start somewhere. You start with the thought to practice, the thought to do good, the thought to meditate, the thought to be mindful of your breath. Everything starts as just one moment, one thought. So we start in small ways, but then you repeat that action, that thought, that activity, and you repeat it, and you do it again, and you do it again, and again, and again. And those moments of mindfulness, or the effort, or the good thought, or the appreciation that you've been bringing up before can come up again, and again, and then they start to join together, and they develop something. What you'll probably find is if you do this simple exercise of just appreciating the good things you have in your life, if you have good health, you have good friends, Dhamma friends, you have the opportunity to practice Dhamma, meditate, you have a peaceful neighborhood, whatever, the good things you have, if you appreciate them, does bring up some joy, some feeling of well-being, even sometimes what we call piti and sukha. Rapture, joy, the inner joy of the mind that is peaceful and calm, even if it's only momentary, briefly. And that also brings with it, with the goodwill or the good sense of well-being, then you get goodwill, what we call metta, which is a cause for karuna, compassion to arise. These are the sort of qualities you need to begin your meditation with. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything, but you do have to have a certain goodwill for yourself so that you're willing to practice. You need some conviction, some confidence in what you're doing. The word in Buddhism is saddha, which is often translated as faith, but because faith in other religions and other systems is often used slightly differently, we sometimes are not sure how that helps us, having faith. You can say, well, I believe in the Buddha, or I believe in the Dhamma, but it's not simply belief. It's a conviction that leads on to action. There's a willingness to meditate, willingness to do good, to help people, to practice kindness, for example. It's not simply a belief that it is good, it's also a willingness to go on and do something based on that faith. It's leading you onwards, leading to energy or effort in the practice. And that's an important point because we're dealing with a lot of inertia. The way of the world is it's constantly on so many levels telling us not to practice Buddhism. One is, like I said, a lot of negative news and comments from other people maybe, our own doubts. Sometimes we feel tired, sometimes it's this happening, we're busy, sometimes this happens, that happens. There's always plenty of excuses and reasons why we shouldn't do good in a situation, why we shouldn't be kind, why we shouldn't be mindful. Always plenty there, which is why we have to come back to this source of joy and faith to start with, just to kind of get things going. When your battery is flat with a car, you need to push the car, physically push it maybe, or get a friend to jump start it with their cables, or get someone to tow you until you can travel again, the car works again. Dhamma practice is like that. Sometimes you have to come back to square one, maybe even every day, come back to square one, at least for a few moments. You bow to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, you remind yourself why I practice, what the purpose is, what's the value. And you get a little bit of energy, momentum, then you can start meditating, or if you're practicing some generosity or charity or helping someone, or you're determining to keep precepts, all of these things take a bit of energy. So you have to have that motivation, that faith to start with. Saddha, or conviction in the practice and the goodness of the practice, is one of the 5 faculties, spiritual faculties, or we call them indriya. This is the way the Buddha talked about people when he was spreading or radiating loving kindness every day. The loving kindness of the Buddha is a bit like the rays of the sun or the moonlight. At the moment, we've got a full moon. It goes out in all directions, and it's just a matter of where it falls and who is met by this radiance of the compassion and wisdom of the Buddha. But every day they say the Buddha would meditate, radiate thoughts of loving kindness, and then see who would benefit from Dhamma teaching today. It could be someone, to the north, to the south, to the east, the west, near or far, young or old, male or female, totally like the rays of the sun, totally unbiased in the way it falls down on the earth. The Buddha's kindness and compassion will go out, and then he might walk to go and meet that person, or conditions might come up and that person comes to the monastery to see the Buddha and hear a talk, or sometimes the Buddha goes out to find someone. But the way he would determine who's ready to hear the Dhamma and benefit and really realize the Dhamma, maybe become enlightened that very day, he'd look at their spiritual faculties. Do they have any faith? Is their faith, their saddha, established? How strongly is it established? If it's very kind of shaky, the Buddha probably, I don't know if he sat there and thought about it, he might just kind of know. He'd just sort of, maybe I'll leave them for another day. So you don't want to be like that, do you? You have some faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, but, it's a bit shaky, a bit up and down. The day the enlightened teacher comes to town, your faith is down, so you miss the talk, you don't go, you didn't turn on the Zoom session, or whatever it is. Saddha, as an indriya, has to be developed until it's strong, continuous, always there in some form or other. It's not going to disappear on you. Your battery is not going to just drain out every day. When you wake up in the morning, there'll be a bit left for you to continue the next day. That's what we call saddha as an indriya, a faculty of mind, something that's there, stays. And of course you can build on it, and it will grow through practice, and it will support you, but you have to make it strong. That's where you get your motivation to keep meditating, keep practicing generosity, keep listening to the Dhamma. Sure, you'll have resistance. It's not all smooth and easy and plain sailing. Sometimes we feel lazy, we're distracted with other things, we have doubts. So our saddha, our conviction in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha has always been challenged. But you notice when they talk about noble ones, people who have practiced and realized the Dhamma, this is one of the qualities that doesn't leave them. Their faith, their confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha is always there. That's the kind of certainty you're aiming for in the practice. So sometimes you have to come back and ask yourself, how much faith, saddha in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha do I have? And you may previously have had more. How can I bring this up again? Because it's a necessary part of learning how to motivate yourself, being willing to maybe put up with some of the obstacles and difficulties. Why do we sit through a bit of pain when we meditate? Partly it's because we've got saddha in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. When we sit up, for longer periods, we do longer periods of meditation, sitting, walking, or we listen to a long Dhamma talk, or we put effort into some aspect of the practice. That's going to be from saddha, faith, confidence. The day I ordained as a Buddhist monk, many years ago, one of the monks who participated in my ordination, Thai monk, I was asking him what he did the day before, practicing my rudimentary Thai skills. And it happened that the day before was the Buddhist holy day, what we call the One Prat Monk Day, they call it in Thailand. And he had stayed up all night meditating. I said, you've been up all night and now we've got an ordination and you must be tired. And he said, no, I've got saddha. So of course physically he probably was tired, but what he meant was his mind is still willing to practice, willing to go on with the ordination, which takes about an hour to ordain a few Buddhist monks. He's willing to do that. He wasn't bothered by his tiredness. He still had the energy from his saddha to carry on. So saddha is like that. It can carry you through when you have illness or injury, or you're tired, or you have some obstacle come up in your life. It can carry you through. When you have saddha as a faculty, then it naturally gives rise to energy, effort in the practice, virya, which is the second of the 5 faculties, indriyas. That's why I was saying saddha in Buddhism isn't just belief. I believe it, I don't believe it. It's more a conviction that leads on to action, a willingness to practice, to put effort. And of course, if you want to get to understand the kind of truths and the way things are that the Buddha was pointing to, you have to put effort into training yourself. Cultivating the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, is to be cultivated. It's not something you just believe in. 4 Noble Truths are to be realized, known or seen for oneself. They're not something you just believe in. Quite often you hear that. You hear Buddhists say, partly it's in response to other religions around them. Other people think in those terms. They say, what do you believe in? You're a Buddhist, what do you believe in? And people say, I believe in karma, is quite a common answer, or I believe in the 4 Noble Truths. But really, we don't just believe, it's I believe and then I practice as well. But often we kind of don't make that link, do we? Our belief just sort of stops there. We think that's good enough. I've ticked the box. When the census comes around, I've ticked the box. And then we go quiet. We don't do much because we already have a belief as though we've got something. But a belief like that is very easily shaken. It doesn't take much to dislodge it. It's kind of fragile. Real saddha has to lead on to virya, and virya, putting effort into the practice, will lead on to the other spiritual faculties arising, mindfulness, samadhi and wisdom. So then ultimately your faith becomes combined with some wisdom and understanding. It's not just belief, it's I believe and then practice and then I see and know for myself, so what I've practiced comes back to match with what the Buddha taught, and that's why I have faith, and my faith is reinforced by my practice. For that to happen, that whole sort of cycle and cause and effect to take place, you have to practice. Faith has to lead on to effort. And so we call Buddhism, it's a teaching of effort, energy. We put energy to every single aspect of the practice. It's one of the teachings that comes up most often in the Buddhist teachings. If you read any of the suttas or a number of suttas, you'll start to see that coming up. Somebody is praised by the Buddha because they have virya. You need virya to overcome unwholesome mental states, the causes of suffering, to abandon the causes of suffering, and so on. Whether you're practicing generosity and dana, you need virya, you need effort. Keeping precepts, you need effort. Practicing mindfulness, you need effort. And really, the sort of central aspect of our virya is it's the effort to cultivate more mindfulness. That's what it leads to, which just happens to be the next spiritual faculty, this faculty of sati, mindfulness. But people are always asking, where does mindfulness come from? Ajahn, how can I be more mindful? What can I do to be mindful? Well, if you look in this process of cause and effect, it's virya, isn't it? And where does virya come from? It comes from saddha. So everything helps everything else. Mindfulness comes from our effort. We put effort to attend to the present moment and bring up the quality of mindfulness, often accompanied by sampajanya, clear comprehension, but for briefness we usually just say sati, but usually they come together, sati, sampajanya, they work together Sati, sampajanya means clear comprehension, clear understanding of what you're doing. Sati is paying attention, presence of mind, keeping in mind. So you can be mindful of your precepts in a situation. Oh, I keep the precept, I've undertaken not to kill, say, and so when the ants invade your kitchen, you don't rush for the spray to kill them all. You maybe gently sweep them out, or you find some way to just prevent them coming back in, or maybe keep your kitchen a bit cleaner. That's Ajahn Chah's instruction. If you have problems with insects in your kitchen or something, the sort of situations where you might be tempted to kill, he just said you should keep your kitchen cleaner. Don't leave so much sugar around and crumbs and so on. If you're a Buddhist monk, you understand this, because sugar, honey, these are one of the few things we can have in the evening. They're considered a tonic or a medicine, give you a bit of energy. We can't have food, but you can have a tonic. So if you're in the forest and you're careless enough to try storing some sugar or honey in your kuti in the jungle or in the forest, and you're not very careful how you do it, you leave the lid of the jar a little bit off, or you spill some honey or sugar, or you have a cup that's got sugar in it, a sweet drink or something, and you don't wash it. You only have to wait 5 minutes and the ants are all over it. And what do? You can't kill them. That's the whole point. You have to be mindful of your precept. I don't kill. So then you have to go through a lot of complicated methods to get rid of the problem, meaning to get rid of the ants without killing them. And occasionally the ants win. They can take over your whole hut and you have to leave, and the ants win that day anyway. But you can be mindful of precepts, mindful of your speech, your actions. You can be mindful of, obviously, your meditation object. And this is number one, where sattha, virya, and sati, these three faculties are working together. It comes down to, say, you're practicing mindfulness of breathing. That's where they're all developing very strongly together. And the Buddha would know that. This person, they're doing their meditation practice. This person, they're very mindful. Their mind is in a clear state. If I give a talk, they'll listen. They'll remember what I say. Today I gave a talk at lunchtime, and there's three ladies on one side, and they just spent the whole time talking amongst themselves, which that's their right, you might say, but I guarantee they didn't know at all what I said. They're not mindful of listening. I'm not sure they were listening to each other either, but that's another story. If you're going to listen to the Buddha, say one day you're born and you live in the time of a Buddha, well, you've got to be mindful, don't you? Otherwise he's not going to bother. This person, they got no mindfulness, why teach? So virya leads to mindfulness. So mindfulness of your meditation object, mindfulness of your precepts, mindfulness, say, of listening to a dharma talk, mindfulness of an object of reflection. So it could be keeping the perception of impermanence in mind. Everything is not sure, as Ajahn Chah used to say. Be mindful of that. It's not sure, it's uncertain. Then when things show their uncertainty to you, things don't go as planned or surprises happen and so on, you don't get upset or shaken by these unexpected turns of events, because you're being mindful of impermanence. It can stop you getting frustrated with life, angry when there's, you have to wait for something, somebody is late, or there's traffic, or the plane is delayed, or whatever it may be. If you keep mindful of the object of impermanence, then everything makes a lot more sense in the world, because you're realizing, this body is changing, my mind is changing, thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, the world around me is constantly changing. It doesn't take very long for you to become quite wise, and you see, the world is an impermanent, changing place, and I can't control all of that. You can influence things a little bit, but not much. So, sattha, virya, sati leads to samadhi as well, but it also leads directly to wisdom, doesn't it? fifth of the spiritual faculties, panya, insi, or panya, indriya. If you're mindful, you pay attention, you learn. You learn information, you absorb information, you can reflect on it with mindfulness, and then you can see or observe what's going on because you're mindful. And that's what the Buddha was aiming for. He's only giving us useful instructions how to develop this mind. Samadhi as an indriya is really just the continuation of mindfulness. The more mindfulness you have, the firmer your mind becomes. The more continuous the mindfulness is, the more one-pointed you are, the more steady the mind is. And when it becomes really firm, steady, one-pointed, we call that samadhi, which is another indriya. But it comes out of the effort of developing mindfulness, which brings forth samadhi. And samadhi has a lot of rewards, bonuses. It's like, you get the paycheck, you can buy a lot of stuff now every month. The samadhi comes, you have the joy, the relaxation of body and mind, piti and sukha. Your mind is quite soft, gentle, able to contemplate, has one-pointedness, it's not distracted, it's no longer stressed. Samadhi has many benefits. So as a faculty of mind, it means it's almost like you could say a skill that you develop, becomes part of who you are, your practice. Sattha, virya, sati, samadhi, they're all there. It's not like samadhi is developed alone. It's developed in conjunction with sati, virya, and sattha. The more states of calm, stillness of mind you develop for longer, it's common sense, isn't it? If you practice more mindfulness, your mind will settle down, become calm and still for longer periods of time. The longer periods of time allow you to see things as they are. The characteristics of a mind without samadhi, distracted, easily distracted, shaky, all over the place, we all know that, we've had that. It's very hard to contemplate, it's very hard to see things and know things because your mind's all over the place. The Buddha said it's like water that's got a lot of wind on it, a lot of waves and froth and ripples. And you can't see your reflection, you can't see through the water to the bottom, you can't see your reflection because it's just all moved all over the place. That's a mind without samadhi. With samadhi, things become clear, still, and you can observe the way things are, the nature of things, as I was saying earlier, dhammacati, which means like the nature of the way things are, simply because you're still enough to notice them. When the mind's moving, you don't see much. It's all over the place. As the mind settles down, the mindfulness is there, the samadhi is there. That stillness just opens up for your mind to see things, both outwardly, what's going on in the world around you, but then inwardly as well. Seeing cause and effect, so you get to know when your mind is still, quiet, one-pointed. So you see something, you get to know what happens next. Any feeling is stimulated, pleasure or pain, or maybe just neutral feeling. What does your mind do with that? I like pleasure, so you keep looking at what you like that brings you pleasure. I don't like pain, so if you look at something and it brings you a painful feeling, however subtle, you don't like it, so you stop looking, you close your eyes. When you're really, when I was a kid, I can remember a couple of occasions where there was something that was really frightening. The best escape is just close your eyes. You don't have to see it. It might still be there, but you close your eyes, it's as if it's gone. At least you get a temporary relief. I still have that nowadays, but it's not things that are scary. It's more like when I'm walking around the monastery and I see somebody doing something not very good, I just close my eyes, then I don't have to see it. But joking aside, pleasure and pain, whether it's through the eyes, stimulated by what we see, through the ears, what we hear, smell, taste, touch, or just the mind internally itself, we react, don't we? We like pleasure, we dislike pain. We want more pleasure, try and do things to get more pleasure, try and get rid of pain, get away from it, cut it out, stop it, whatever, try and get rid of that. So we have 6 senses, the external 5, and then the internal mind itself. They're constantly bringing us pleasure, pain, and also neutral feeling as well, neither pleasure nor pain. But they all stimulate the mind. But as you become more mindful and the samadhi comes up, then you have a chance to see or know what's going on. You may not be able to stop anything yet. You're following your habits, karma again. You follow your habits, but at least you can know, I like this. It always stimulates pleasure, so I keep wanting to eat it or smell it or taste it or see it. I don't like that, so I keep reacting with aversion. You start to see your reactions. Attraction, aversion, pleasure and pain. You see how your behaviors are affected by that. It could be just the way you talk to someone. You like this person, so you talk all kinds of positive, energetic things, nice things, pleasantries because you like them. This person you don't like, so you say all kind of you're short with them, no time for them. You say a few words that are not very nice, maybe even you're rude to them or something. You see your own behavior on the level of your actions, your speech, your mind, just the way you think as well, in response to pleasure and pain associated with sense contact. And this is a huge part of what we're practicing following the Buddhist teachings, but it's not an easy practice, of course. But you take a step-by-step approach. So first of all, you get to be aware of how things cause you pleasure and pain, how you like pleasure and dislike pain. Then you may introduce certain practices to help deal with that. So as you establish more mindfulness, you may notice the obvious thing, as I was saying just now, everything is impermanent. You might enjoy something, it's pleasurable, you see it, you taste it, you hear it, but then it passes. And as that sense contact, that experience passes, the pleasure fades, stops. Same with pain. We're not experiencing pain all day long, even when we got an injury or an illness or some problem. You'll notice pain comes and goes, pleasure comes and goes, pain comes and goes. That's panya, wisdom. That's the knowing, the seeing of the changing nature of your sense contact, your reactions, the feelings, the thoughts that are stimulated, the emotions that are stimulated. These are changing. Mindfulness and some wise reflection reveals that to us through the practice. The steadiness and stillness of samadhi reveals it, the mindfulness reveals it, and then ultimately panya, wisdom, clear knowledge and vision of the way things are, that reveals it. You get to see, I do still have the things I like and the things I don't like in life, but as you become more mindful and a little wiser, more insightful, maybe you realize you don't have to follow every desire, every attraction, every aversion. Especially if it's going to lead you into suffering, maybe you just quietly let it go. So wisdom leads on to letting go, relinquishment, dispassion, we say dispassion, detachment. And people are always asking this, they say, that means like Buddhism just makes you this kind of dry, robotic, kind of unfeeling person. Because that's what it sounds like on paper. But that's Buddhism on paper, isn't it? You have to practice it to understand what it really means. So it doesn't mean to say all the enlightened beings, the Buddha and the enlightened beings, had no joy. They certainly did have joy. They had peaceful minds. There's a lot of joy with that. They had kindness and compassion all the time. And that's not dry and lifeless or meaningless. That's something that's very good. It's actually something very desirable. They have wisdom and understanding. They don't get deluded, so they have no problems being scammed or whatever. They're not deluded. They see the way things are. And they have compassion because they understand the human mind very well. So then they can teach, help other people. So far from being kind of lifeless, dry, you might say boring, it's not. Their mind is actually very alert and alive to the way things are because it's well trained. But on paper, it's hard to express it, isn't it? You can write about this or talk about it. I'm just talking, these are just words. it may not sound that attractive. To be able to let go of pleasure and pain sounds like, oh, well then your life becomes really drab and dreary. But if you experience it, what does it mean? It means you have control of your mind. When these 5 spiritual faculties are developed well, you have control of your mind. You don't have to follow thoughts and desires of attraction or aversion. You have more equanimity, which is the highest peace. You have a peaceful mind. Even if the world around you is very tempting and alluring, there's things that make you want and desire, things happening that make you have full of aversion or fear, you don't necessarily have to always react like that. You can know things but don't have to react with fear, aversion, or desire and attraction. You have the peace of equanimity, which is what Buddhism is moving towards, but it's a step-by-step process. It's not necessarily you'll achieve that in one day. It may come in small bursts, longer bursts, sometimes clear, sometimes not very clear. It all depends how your practice is going. It depends on your karma, your character, how much effort you put in. But the way the Buddha would measure someone's ability and their progress in the practice is these 5 faculties. Whether they have sattha, strong sattha, whether they have virya, whether they have sati, samadhi and panya, whether they really see things as they are, or they're still just caught into their reactions and still struggling, as we are maybe. The Buddha would say, practice more. Make these 5 faculties really strong, really clear. Then you have a chance to actually see the Dhamma. And one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. One who knows the Dhamma knows the Buddha. One who knows the Buddha knows the Dhamma. So even if the Buddha is not physically around anymore, we can still get to know the Buddha. That's the words of the Buddha. When you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. To see the Dhamma or know the Dhamma, you have to develop these 5 spiritual faculties, bring them up, make them very strong, very complete. So maybe I'll just say this much for the moment. That's the Dhamma talk, and afterwards I think there's a chance for some Q&A.